Yeah, thank you. Welcome. My name's Andy Fisher. I've been in place in charge of the Connected Autonomous Vehicle team at National Highways for best part of 18 months now. And when I was fortunate enough to take over the team, we'd done a lot of work through our road investment strategy period one, so between 2015 and 2020. We're now in RIS2 between 2020 and 2025, where we're really trying to put into practice and lay the foundations for what the learning we have done and what we're trying to do taking forward. As Stephen said in the introduction at the very start, we have recently changed our names. So from where we were Highways England, we are now National Highways, and whilst we're still picking the bones of that name change, one of the things has been suggested to me is that because of our the implications of our name, we'll actually be leading on the development of standards for cab adaptation and adoption for all local authorities, etc., throughout the UK. So we have quite a key role moving forward. Just a bit touch here on our road network. Over 4,000 miles of motorways and major A roads that effectively what we deem as the SRN, Strategic Road Network. Lots of facts and figures there on that picture, but I'd like to bring you to the 100,000 sensors, including traffic sensors, the 3,500 of electronic messaging signs we have around our network. It's a nice, lovely closed system, typically based around smart motorways. We know where they are, we know what they do, so what's the problem? Can't we just leave it as is? Well, really we can't. We've got to move forward. Over time, they will become increasingly irrelevant. As road operators, we continue to digitize. And as customers driven by OEMs, vehicle manufacturers, service providers, they're going to be receiving more information directly into the vehicle. So Google Maps overtook our responsibility some time ago. So we've really got to get ourselves back in the game and look to manage our network far more effectively on a much more even platform. So connected services. Darren alluded to the cooperative ITS, CITS services, and that's effectively what we're talking about here. We've deemed it connected services. It's just a badge, but we effectively are using different communication technologies such as mobile networks, cellular networks, or ITS G5, so roadside Wi-Fi, to use those kind of communication technologies for vehicles to talk to themselves, talk to each other, talk to the infrastructure, or the whole ecosystem of V2X. But what we're trying to do is lay the foundation so what we're trying to provide to the customer, they're not limited to in-vehicle systems. So we're trying to remain agnostic in that space. I'll talk more about that later. Obviously, there's benefits to be had here, not only for ourselves and let's say the public purse, in terms of if we can provide information straight into the vehicle, then we don't necessarily have to build new infrastructure. We in the long term and much longer term, we can start considering reduction in the amount of roadside infrastructure we have, therefore reducing maintenance costs, etc. But currently, our most powerful tool for traffic management is our smart motorway sections. It is unaffordable and unjustifiable to roll that out across our entire network. So what connected services and CITS will allow us to do is to tackle the whole SRN and provide high quality information to the customer wherever they are on our road network. So big pluses, big wins. I think last week, National Highways, or maybe the week before, launched our digital road strategy. Digital roads make up of three parts: digital operations, so how we manage the network; digital construction, so utilizing the latest techniques to how in construction and building the road network and improvement schemes, etc. Also digital for customer, where we've identified ourselves as we need to become to a position where we become a high quality information provider. And what we've done is made a decision that we will go cellular by default to provide these in-vehicle signage. It'll be a phased introduction as a variety of services, as Darren alluded to on the previous previous presentation. There's a whole host of services, day one services that have already been predefined. Variable speed limit information, red X, so individual lane enforcement types, roadworks warnings, stop vehicles warnings. That there's the possibility of tailored freight services. There's a whole lot of work to go into developing that, not least around mapping, technology, data, standards, etc. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But this model on the right-hand side, this data service cycle, is kind of where we think we can play a role, or rather on day one, what is our role most likely to be. So we have our connected customer moving around the network, receiving information via the in-vehicle signage, or from their mobile or sat-nav systems. And that's collecting data as they move around the network, whether they know it or not. And what we intend to do is start to collaborate better, more effectively with those OEMs and wayfinders, to be able to utilize and take on that board, to be able to generate the services. National Highways intend on generating those services to manage our network more effectively, enrich our current practices and procedures, but also develop new ones, and exciting opportunities in that space. And as I alluded to, become a high quality information provider. So we'd like to be able to position ourselves so we can send our services back to the OEMs and wayfinders, and ultimately in front of our customer. We recognise that JLR, Audi aren't going to allow us to beam our preferred messaging straight into the vehicle. Google Maps are going to add buffers to make sure that whatever they've got, there's a vetting process, if you like. So until legislation ultimately changes to that effect, it's got to be a more collaborative approach. So as I alluded to previously, we went through our RIS1 period where we conducted a trial on the A2M2 down in Kent, where we tested these various in-vehicle signages, roadworks warnings, speeds, GLOSA, which is the green light optimized speed advisory service, and we tested the ITS-G5, and we tested the roadside Wi-Fi, and we tested cellular networks. Comparatively, they're both as effective. So in terms of us day one trying to lay the foundations and get things up and running, we've made the decision to go down cellular route. And that came out nicely through the evaluation report. We're currently conducting a feasibility study into what the data system architecture internally is going to look like, and once we've done that, we're going to be also identifying some initial day one services that are feasible for us to launch, such as variable speed limit or variable message signs, so replicating those congestion type signs, the free text signs, and being able to provide that through an API out to vehicle manufacturers and likes of Google, etc. Try and test, evaluate all through these different services. This is not an exhaustive list of beta services along the bottom. If you can think of it in the future, the data will allow us to be able to provide it to the customer. And kind of key along that bottom there is there's no defined time period as yet. We're very early stages. We know what large scale IT projects can happen or can happen to them. So we're being a bit cautious in how quickly we'll be able to roll that. But we're optimistic that by the end of RIS2, so as in by 2025, we'll be hoping to launch certainly the first services to the public. Who is the customer? Our traditional customers have been people in their cars, people in their trucks. It's not going to be necessarily the same model in the future, in that wayfinders and vehicle manufacturers are also going to be our customer if we're supplying them these types of information services. Local authorities as a customer, as a collaborator, we've got to, work as an entire transport ecosystem. We've got to start understanding penetration levels. We know on day one, not everyone is going to have a connected vehicle. It's going to be an evolution of technology and fleet. But what does day one look like? How will that picture develop and build up, and the impacts for our services we intend? How's that going to look in practice? So there's an awful lot of work to do in that space. Mapping, it's a bit dull, to be honest. I'm not used to thinking about things in this scenario, but in order to provide lane accurate services, we have to really understand our own mapping systems. We have our own internal mapping systems. I dare say we've probably got a couple at least, and we've got to make sure that the data architecture and systems, the mapping architecture in the background is good enough internally for our own use operationally. Never mind putting that information out to the customer, and we have to do a strong consolidation piece, making sure that whatever maps we're using and the services are being identified wherever they are. Google and TomTom, etc., have the same types of mapping services, so everything is being located at the right place. I can't imagine a more heartbreaking scenario where we're trying to launch these services for a customer to provide them really good information, and we're giving it, because we've got a mapping error, we're giving them to in the wrong carriageway, and once bitten, twice shy. Suddenly that our whole intention and our best endeavours fall flat on their face. I alluded to at the start, we're going cellular by default. We recognise that it's going to be our most cost-effective and practical way of getting information out to the customer. But we've got to understand, what is the requirements for those services. We all remember the days of having to send a text message 10 minutes before midnight just to make sure it get through. Well, what does 40,000-50,000 vehicles around Heathrow on the M25 on a Friday afternoon look like? Are we going to be able to get going to crack the latency and ensure that we've got enough coverage? We've got an awful lot of network. There's going to be not spots around tunnels, for instance. How do we counteract those not spots where cellular coverage isn't as good? And then we've got some operational technology. Not only are we ultimately providing better information to the customer, but we've got huge amounts of data that we should be able to use and improve our own operational technology, be more proactive as opposed to reactive. An awful lot to do assessing around the data, cybersecurity. That's going to play a big part moving forward, certainly as CITS evolves. The latency, it's absolutely essential that we start understanding how quickly. So, for instance, we're part of the European Data Task Force, which is allowing us national road authorities access to certain use case safety data from vehicles. Vehicle manufacturers are supplying that, and that's been mandated. So we've got to understand how quickly a sensor in a car tells the vehicle manufacturer what's happening. It then goes and tells us what's happening, and then we do with what we need to do, and then that goes back to the vehicle manufacturers and back down to the in vehicle signage. We've really got it in order to be timely. People travel fast on our network, and if we're too slow, the information they're receiving becomes irrelevant. An awful lot to do around back office. How on earth do we, who are a traditional road operator, how on earth do we evolve ourselves to be more relevant in the data space? But then we've also got to work out what are the requirements for each service. We know currently on a smart motorway, if a queue develops on a loop in the road, that detects, that triggers the algorithm, which then sets the signals and tells everyone to drive at 40. Well, if we're talking about covering the whole SRN, we've got to think about where we're getting that data and levels of performance for that data and how it's appropriately used. as Darren rather succinctly said, there's an awful lot of standards to be kept up to speed with, influence, adopt, and make sure that all road authorities, particularly in Europe, are singing on the same hymn sheet, so that the vehicle manufacturers, it makes it easy for them, for want of a better phrase, if we're all in this together. But then obviously, we have a role as the author of the design. The MRB is the design maintenance of roads and bridges standards. So we are responsible for those. So whatever we write in those typically gets passed down to local authorities, etc., to embed. So there's practice in there. One of the questions I really like to ask, and I'm hoping there'll be an answer one day. What does it mean in terms of legislation in vehicle signage? If we were to take away all signs on our roads and replace it with in-vehicle, I'm pretty sure the law won't hold it. If you get pulled over by the police and you were deemed breaking the law, and if it's just an in-vehicle signage telling you what speed limit you should stick to, things need changing in that space. So that's enough time for me to be waffling on. I think that's the end of me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to pass back to Matthew for I'm sure maybe there's some questions coming.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy.
Sorry to interrupt. We've run out of time for questions, so if you could perhaps answer a couple of questions in the chat, that would be really appreciated.
No problem. Sorry for waffling on.
That's no problem. Okay, so right now I'm going to go to the poll results. Hopefully you can see the poll results on your screen, and I'd like to invite Darren and Andy back to discuss the poll results with me. So as you can see, out in front is right people and right skills, which is pleasing for me to see as a systems engineer, because we have a mantra: people, process, technology, and those are the three key pillars of systems engineering, and we always put people first as systems engineers. So that's great to see, and a close in second and third are standards, and then government backing in that order. So what does that say to you, Darren? Okay, Darren's not with us, so I'll come back to Andy.
Industry coordinate, yes. It's interesting, the right people, right skills. I think certainly, and I appreciate you've probably got a mix of people on attending today. I'm a transport person by heart, ITS, and we've been through an evolution. Certainly in the last 15 years, we've gone from just red, amber, green to, as Darren said, to the whole UTC, UTMC, and now we're looking at CITS and these advancements. So I don't know whether you can put right people, right skills in, because it's an evolving space. There'll be some people, I guess, ahead of the game. It's amazing how powerful our digital service or our IT department have become in National Highways over the last just couple of years. But yeah, certainly industry coordination, that's going to be key, because that's really what we want to see come out of this, because we can't do it alone, and I'm sure vehicle manufacturers, I hope, would feel the same way.